Hi Bother Brigade, here's what's bothering me today. We didn't really have enough time, and again, I was sick as a dog last Sunday, so this is about a week overdue. Now, I know February was a month, and so is January, and already March is looking to be yet another month of terribleness. But as we pointed out in the previous installment of this video, there was a lot of good things that happened in January, and also there were a lot of good things that happened in February. And that's what this is today. Yet another special edition of the Sunday Sum Up that's kind of a lot of the good news that we maybe missed or we forgot about over the course of this month. Now, this is not positive leftist news. I imagine that a lot of people here probably are already aware of it, but if not, positive leftist news, otherwise known as PLN, they do great stuff every month. They just recently had their own video, and it was good to see that that came out first because I can see that, oh, there's all that good news, and then there's also this good news that I've talked about. So actually, there's been a lot of good news this month. So once you're done here, please go check out their video. Chill Goblin hosted that episode, and it's honestly just a good reminder because we all need that sweet hopium every now and then, right? We need something to remind us that even with all the terribleness going on, there's a lot of good and progress that has been made and is continuing to be made already just in this year. So let's start at the very beginning with the first big story of February. Israel's apartheid against Palestinians, a cruel system of domination and a crime against humanity. Yeah, we actually kind of started February off with a banger when Amnesty International basically said, with no real strings or conditions attached, Israel is an apartheid state. And Amnesty International is a pretty significant international charity. So it shows that in terms of the movement towards getting more and more people to recognize Israel for the apartheid state it is, this is another crucial step in that development. It's by no means insignificant. So kudos to Amnesty International for calling it for what it is. It makes it even harder for Israel to fight back against these allegations, and that's a good thing to see. Also fairly early in February, on February 8th, there was the following video from More Perfect Union.
There's a lot of tower cranes up downtown, and just drove through there, and those jobs are ghost towns right now. They need concrete, they're waiting on concrete. We want a deal, we want to go back to work.
We are a band of 330 ready mix drivers, dump truck drivers that take a lot of pride in our work.
How long can Seattle go without the construction continuing? We're willing to stay out here as long as we have to.
Because of the ongoing demonstrations, Seattle's $23 billion construction industry has paused without concrete.
We worked through the pandemic for them, made them a ton of money during the pandemic. And to turn around and deny these families the same medical coverage that we earned, just 2-3 years ago is crazy.
They think they can benefit in the long run off of shortchanging us when they've even said they have the money to give us what we're looking for.
The biggest single thing we're demanding is respect.
And they refuse to negotiate. It's their turn to put another offer on the table, and they refuse to.
Striking concrete workers in Seattle have shut down the city's $23 billion construction industry. The Teamsters are fighting for higher wages and better health benefits for retirees. 34 workers walked out in November. Now more than 300 workers at 6 companies are on a general strike. And there's more to that video, and I encourage everyone to go watch that video and to support More Perfect Union because they are covering a lot of these strike actions and unionization efforts that are happening across America, and I think even a few other corners of the world. And that is something that I think more of us could stand to see, especially given how terrible the capitalist dystopia is right now. But it's a good thing in terms of they and others are really showing that they're tired of being pushed around. And as the video mentions, everyone from Starbucks to John Deere workers and BNSF, which we even talked about here in an earlier episode. There have been lots of good strike actions that have been happening and are continuing to happen. And so power to these workers who shut down a $23 billion industry. That's again with the people in power don't want you to realize or remember that it's actually you who have the power, so long as you recognize it and begin to organize and show solidarity with your fellow working class. So here's hoping that the striking workers in Seattle actually get some real solid benefits and a good positive new contract. And speaking of contracts, that brings us to our next story, where there was actually a truly massive win for hotel housekeepers. First union contract at JW Marriott Santa Monica Hotel wins $25 an hour for hotel housekeepers. In January, Unite Here Local 11 was able to secure a first union contract for workers at the JW Marriott in Santa Monica with victories like minimum wages of $25 an hour by the expiration of the contract in 2023, free family health insurance, a pension plan, and job security protections. Housekeeping employees at the hotel won a union election in 2016. Columbia Sussex, the then owners and managers of the hotel, fought the unionization effort, leading to a contentious and bitter labor dispute that dragged on for more than 5 years. So thankfully, those 5 years of hell are behind them now. It's a shame that it took that long, but apparently it paid off. They get a brand new contract with great benefits, pensions, and $25 an hour. Again, power to the working class. And speaking still on the working class, gee, I'm wondering if this is going to kind of be a bit of a theme today, wink wink. There has not been enough discussion or attention paid to the strike in Haiti, and I do want to do my own separate video on that because there's a lot that's gone into the background of that and what's happening right now. But suffice to say that the people of Haiti have actually been striking for a while now, and they continue to strike to this day. The workers of Haiti strike again, today in Port-au-Prince. They demand living wages from greedy transnational capitalists to make the clothes we love to wear here in the States. Yeah, if people tend to look in the backs on the tags of their shirts, right, you'll see usually made in China, made in Bangladesh, made in, Thailand, Haiti, usually Vietnam. They're usually made in a handful of countries. And so, of course, this is what happens, where Haiti, due to just decades of exploitation for their cheap labor by manufacturing companies, they make a lot of t-shirts and clothes and textiles and stuff that are then shipped as blanks to the States, where then they put on whatever, a simple pattern, and then they ship it off to wherever at a significantly marked up price. That's basically how it works. And so Haitians, having dealt with, again, so much, right, between natural disasters and incredible levels of gang violence and political corruption, remember their president was recently assassinated, it's just been not a good time in Haiti for a while, and yet workers are still being exploited by wealthy, massive international companies, and they are finally taking a stand against it. And as I'm sure you could tell, those crowds aren't exactly anything to sneeze at. But bringing it up here to Canada for a quick second, remember how, again, one of the worst parts about February was the trucker convoy that occupied mostly Ottawa, but there were various efforts all around, including at the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor, and there's still been convoys and protests all over piecemeal since then. But the Ottawa one was definitely the big one because it was basically an occupation, and they called with their memorandum of understanding for what amounted to a coup d'etat of the democratically elected government of Canada. And as we've talked about before in our many videos on the trucker convoys, there were some less than savory people there who decided to take money from the homeless. And a lot of people decided to, support this charity that was forced to give food meant for the homeless to belligerent truckers. So the good news to come from this is that the Ottawa Homeless Shelter received $750,000 in donations after harassment from convoy protesters. Donations to an Ottawa homeless shelter have reached about $750,000 after protesters from the Freedom Convoy harassed staff and volunteers and demanded food from their soup kitchen. More than 13,000 people have donated about $750,000 to the Shepherds of Good Hope since January 30th, the head of the shelter announced Thursday. What began with people wanting to make up for a few meals has now gone far beyond that, President and CEO Deirdre Freeheit said in a video posted online. Thanks to the incredible unanticipated support, we can accelerate our efforts to end homelessness in our city by building more housing. You absolutely love to see it, right? Just taking those terrible actions of greedy, selfish bastards, basically, and turning that around to just overwhelm that homeless shelter and charity with such love and support to the tune of $750,000. So, don't think I need to donate some of that money to that. We'll donate to some of the other various businesses and charities and organizations that have been impacted. Because remember, or maybe some people don't remember, but my patrons were very kind and generous. I put it to them on Patreon saying, hey, would you mind if I took the money from, February when that was happening and put that Patreon money to different charities or organizations that have been impacted by the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa. And I would also match that amount. So it turned out to be like $265 or something like that. I have the official tally. And so now I've been looking at various different charities and orgs to donate to. So I think the Shepherds of Good Hope are good. There's probably several others that we can support and donate. If you are from Ottawa or know people in Ottawa who have some good suggestions, please leave them down below. And sadly, still staying on the topic of the trucker convoy for a bit, one of the other things that I remember the trucker convoys were trying to do was to also go around and harass and intimidate students, and also try and get students to do anti-mask walkouts, like, we refuse to go to school unless you let us in without a mask, like that whole thing. Turns out that didn't really happen, and instead the opposite happened, at the very least at a Calgary high school. Calgary students walk out to protest removal of mandatory masking. So while Ontario is terrible, it's often called Hellberta for a reason, especially under notorious clown Jason Kenney, who is the premier of Alberta. He and his government have done not a lot of good things when it comes to this pandemic, and they recently removed a lot of the mask mandates. However, students are protesting against that. So you know what? The kids are all right. It's just a shame that the kids are showing more sense and sensibility than the adults who are governing them. And then on the opposite corner of the world, I think on like Valentine's Day or just the day after or something, New Zealand passes law banning conversion therapy. So New Zealand has made it so that you can no longer try and force someone to change their gender identity or their sexual preference or anything like that. It's actually really good to see, because there aren't that many places that have banned conversion therapy. And as we saw even here in Canada, that was a contentious issue among the Conservatives, to the point that they turfed their now former leader over it. But again, to focus on the good parts, this is yet another country that is passing a good bill that is protecting the LGBT community from further abuse and harassment. So that's a good thing and a step in the right direction. And it's also reassuring to see that the bill was passed nearly unanimously. And speaking of bills, there's some pretty good news coming from Europe. Belgium approves 4-day work week and gives employees the right to ignore their bosses after work. So lots of places have been trialing 4-day work weeks. I think like either Sweden or possibly Finland, maybe even both, have already done a trial of this. And we've also seen that Iceland trialed it. In fact, there's a similar article from this same news source that says Iceland trialed a 4-day working week and it was an overwhelming success. Now, with the Belgium story, that's going to be a case of people can choose to do a 4-day work week if they want to, and without, docking their pay or benefits or anything like that. Others, if they still want the 5-day work week, they're allowed to do that. So they're trying to introduce a certain level of flexibility for it, but already based on what's happened in Iceland and several other trials, it's probably going to work out, which hopefully means that as more and more trials of this happen, more and more places are going to seriously adopt it, either as like, nope, you know what, that's it, everyone's working a 4-day week, or it provides people the option to do a 4-day work week with no changes, consequences, repercussions, etc. So unfortunately, it's still in the trial phase with several places, but at least it's a sign that we're still moving in a positive direction. Which, speaking of positive developments, some cops finally got some consequences. 19 Austin police officers indicted over violent response to 2020 BLM protests. In Texas, a grand jury has indicted 19 Austin police officers on charges of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon for their roles in violently suppressing Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. And I think there were several other stories of like indictments or like officer suspensions, either elsewhere in Texas or in different departments elsewhere in the country. Either way, good goddamn news. We are finally starting to see some cops face consequences. I know it's still a drop in a like massive bucket, but I'll take the win, you feel me? It just feels so good to finally see some cops begin to be held accountable for their egregious and just unjustifiable actions. And then our next story is actually something that seems to have not really been talked about a lot, even though it's the first of its kind. Sandy Hook families reached $73 million settlement with gun manufacturer Remington. Yeah, gun manufacturer Remington made a massive settlement with the parents of Sandy Hook victims. They settled out of court in order to make this happen. It's the first of its kind where a gun manufacturer has been successfully sued and given money to the victims of like a mass shooting where one of their weapons products was used, which now sets a very interesting precedent moving forward. And I know this can't bring back the victims, but at the very least, it's holding someone accountable and trying to get some kind of change and thoughtfulness around this horrifying aspect of American culture that so many seem to think is just, well, that's just part of the price you pay for being American, when the rest of the world is like, feel like that's kind of insane to say. So does this mean the next time there's a shooting like Smith & Wesson gets sued or the NRA gets sued? Like, who knows? This has now opened up an entirely new avenue for action, if you want to call it that, in the future, because unfortunately there will be another mass shooting in the future in America. But again, to focus on the positive aspect, if this means that now companies can be held accountable for their products being used in mass shootings, we may start to see some very serious changes and also changes in lobbying positions. So this is a very good development in that sense. So now we've gone into like mid to late February, and so we're starting to see now some consequences for some people from the Freedom Convoy. There are some pretty good ones in Edmonton. Edmonton police officers who joined Freedom Convoy rally now suspended without pay. Yeah, so apparently at least 2 Edmonton police officers who joined a Freedom Convoy in Alberta. It might have been the Coots one, it might have been a different one in like Calgary, Edmonton, Red Deer, Lethbridge, somewhere in Alberta. But what this meant as a result is they have now been suspended without pay while they are investigated. So they are getting money, which, you know, that's something that I've always hated, is when, oh yeah, no, we're suspending this officer with pay though. I know they just shot an unarmed person, but you know, like, we still gotta pay them, right? So in a way, this is kind of good to see consequences for the absolute bonkers bananas, like, bizarro land adventure that was the Freedom Convoys in Canada. So you'll love to see it. Maybe next time, don't participate in something that is funded with American dark money that seeks to overturn the democratically elected government of Canada and the will of the people with regards to masking and mandates. Maybe do that next time, you dicks. And also here in Canada, it'd be remiss of me not to mention our own strike actions. So, no public bus service in Oakville as transit workers begin strike action. Oakville is a town/bedroom community of the Greater Toronto Area. If memory serves me correctly, it's like neatly sandwiched between Toronto and Hamilton, more or less. And they still, you know, being a larger town, need to have decent transportation service. But they've been kind of jerked around with contracts and everything. And they said, you know what? That's it. We're going on strike. Because of course the town was saying, look, hey, why are you asking for more money? This is expensive. And they said, yeah, but look at the cost of living and inflation. You need to increase our wages to keep up with that. And so when they continued to refuse, they said, that's it, we're going on strike. And can you really blame them? In their own words, we're not looking to make big gains here. We're just looking to get our members a fair deal so that they can put, you know, food on the plate and, you know, their hydro. Everything's going up. Today's economy, the way things are, we can't sustain our life this way. Alice Kelly, president of Unifor Local 1256, told CP24. And yeah, that's really what a lot of these boil down to. It's not people asking for, you know, I want a $50,000 a year salary, but I only want to work 10 hours a week. And I want everything given to me, and I'm allowed to insult everyone freely with no consequence. Like, no one's actually like this. It's just people saying, hey, kind of can't afford to live right now, and this is a, you know, full-time job, and I like this job and maybe some of the benefits that they afford. I'd like to keep doing the job, but I'd like to also be able to, you know, survive, nay, thrive, possibly. So it's really good to see that everywhere, right from America to Canada to Haiti. Like, we got strike actions happening everywhere. But of course the media doesn't want you to know about that, because then you might get ideas in your head and then you might try and unionize your workforce, and the big rich greedy capitalist ruling class is not gonna like that, you know. Which brings us to yet another strike story. Baristas are on strike at Great Lakes Coffee in Detroit, demanding better wages, working conditions, and union representation. So it's not just Starbucks. We got people from all different kinds of coffee companies now beginning to unionize. This, as an anarcho-syndicalist, warms my goddamn heart. And you know what else warms my goddamn heart? Remember those terrible rich jackasses who, when protesters came into a gated community, they showed up with guns, cause like, and like it had really big purge energy to it. Well, those two have faced some consequences. Missouri Supreme Court disciplined St. Louis lawyers who waved guns at BLM protesters. Now, I'll get like some of the bad news out of the way. They had like their actual like sentences, if you want to do that, commuted and like just put on, I think, probation or whatever. But they've been very much disciplined in the fact that they are indefinitely barred from practicing law in that state ever again. And possibly that may apply just like forever in terms of, no, you're not allowed to practice law anywhere else ever. Either way, some really good consequences for these, you know, nearly trigger happy people. Look at this lady. Her finger's there on the trigger, like, oh my God. So, you know, hey, some really tasty consequences for rich jackasses. I absolutely love to see it. And then our last story of today, the delightful, sweet, delicious cherry on top, Scotland's train services nationalized from 1st of April. Yep, ScotRail, the main rail carrier, if you want to call it that, of Scotland, is going to be nationalized by the Scottish government starting in April. The previous arrangement was like some Dutch company was running it, but there were lots of complaints and problems with like the service that they provided and scheduling. So the government is now going to take over. All staff are going to be switched over to this new like nationalized rail system, but they're still going to keep like their jobs, their schedules, their pensions, etc. Except now it's been nationalized. So, you know, that doesn't automatically mean great, but hopefully it means an improvement in service and that they aren't always going to just think about profit motive, and they're going to do the actual thing that government is supposed to do, which is to provide services for citizens. Because, you know, running government like business is actually a fundamentally flawed and, dare I say, stupid idea, because a business is supposed to make money. A government is supposed to provide services and support to citizens, even if sometimes that means operating at a loss. That's the difference between government and business. And the idea of trying to run one like the other is really silly and misguided. But again, just another good news story that is happening within the greater capitalist dystopia, right? I'm not trying to say that all of February was good. I mean, we had the trucker convoys and like Ukraine, like it has definitely not been a really fantastic month or year or couple of years, right? But as you can see, and I'm hoping this is coming through, people everywhere around the planet are fighting back against that. And they're fighting against all the different aspects of terribleness that are in our world, and they are winning very real victories. And it's not just here, right? It's also over in the PLN video and other videos or like podcasts that people are doing about good news that's been happening that we just haven't really heard of. But again, the global track, right, is people everywhere are fighting for progress and justice and fairness and equality. We had numerous good news stories from this month, and we had them last month. We'll see what March holds, but unfortunately the fact that a lot of people didn't know about a great many of these things, and that there are people fighting back and getting some very serious wins and progressive developments for all sorts of people in all corners of the world, it's very sad that that hasn't been in a bigger part of the media landscape, and that's what's bothering me today.